ended up not doing it, I'm really grateful for every one of those decisions that I've made.
I'm not. I'm gonna fucking erase myself. I feel most comfortable looking at my body when I see tattoos.
Yeah.
I just want to get loads of tattoos so I can just be like, oh, look at all those fun images.
Yeah.
I really need to lighten my hair. I need to order some stuff for my hair because like I've been thinking this for ages.
Looks great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Like, because also as well, like, it also was really damaged recently, and I was like stressing out so much. I was like, I need all these products, I need all this, I need all that, but I can't get it. There's this and there's that. And oh dear. It's like stressing for ages and ages and ages and ages and ages. I just was like, wait a minute. I used to do this. Got some the tiniest bit of coconut oil, put it in my hair. Like when I looked in the mirror, and it was like, boom, like everything was healed and fixed, and life was beautiful.
And also, like, I like people whose hair smells like coconut oil are just the most. I like those people. I love them.
Yeah. So I can.
I just really admire people who can grow hair. Like for me, it's like, wow, what a talent.
Wow. Yeah. You are a fuzzy little thing. Okay. How many? Oh wow. Oh wait. Oh God, I was expecting to see the participants actually arriving in, but they're already there. Oh, okay, I see how it works.
Yeah.
Hi, participants.
We have some already. Hi.
Hi. I am actually I'm supposed to be the greaser in the Saturday night 8:30 queer LGBTQI Alphabet Mafia Queers and Recovery Alcoholics Anonymous literature meeting. So I have to greet everyone who arrives on Zoom, but I'm really bad at it because I don't pay enough attention.
Why are you bad at it?
I don't pay enough attention. I don't know how Zoom works. I don't see the people coming in. I'm like, I was just like, I treat it like I'm hosting in a club where I'm like, woo, let's just get the vibe going. And you're supposed to like individually greet people.
You are such a good club host.
What, me and the gals?
I feel like I'm terrible at it.
I'm a really, really, really good club host because I just chat breeze to everyone.
One of my first drag gigs, I was part of a troupe. We called ourselves the Vomettes, and we were doing like roving performances, and people.
Oh man,
people were so uninterested in us, and so I started going around and offering free and unasked for predictions about how people were going to die. So I was going like, would you like a prediction about how you're going to die? It's this.
I can see it in your face.
Yeah, people were not into it.
I was doing tarot card readings one time on a Halloween in like a pub in London, and like just simple ones. And this person was like, and I was giving this reading to this guy who was like, yeah, is the machine going to work? And it was like one of the all-time worst tarot card readings I've ever seen. And I was like, ooh. Oh, and my friend just cracked up. He's like, I said, well, you're supposed to be doing tarot card readings, you're supposed to be kind of neutral. You're not supposed to be the part and go, oh no.
You were very good when we did ours together.
Yes, I actually got a gig from that, and then from someone, and then I got really stressed and completely neglected to manage them properly, so I lost it. But hey, you know, it was. But actually, to be honest though, it was new moon, so now the moon's becoming full again. It's actually a very good time to do tarot card readings online. So if anyone would like a tarot card reading, I am available for that.
And on that note, I think it's about time that we can start. So welcome to those of you who have already joined us on whichever platform you have joined us. Welcome to the artist conversation between myself and Oozing Gloop as part of Dice Forum. Do you want to introduce yourself, Gloop?
My name is Oozing Gloop. I am the world's premier autistic green drag queen and also a local non-binary cryptid. Hi. And these are my girls, the Cock Destroyers.
And I am Queen of the Heavens and of the Earth, Empress of Despair and Architect of Your Eternal Suffering, Olympia Bukkakis. I am a drag performer. Oh, I didn't think of anything beyond that. Yeah.
But that's enough.
Yeah, I live in Berlin. We both live in Berlin. We're both originally from somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's us. If you're joining us via Zoom, feel free to post questions in the Q&A section, and we will come to those as it's within the conversation. So we'll address them during. So don't save your questions until the end.
Yep. And if you're watching not on Zoom, just think them really hard, and me and the girls might pick them up.
Oh God, I wasn't prepared for the girls, and I feel like I'm going to find them really distracting.
It's the first time. It's the first time they come out, and I'm feeling it. I can't sit still with them. I also had a lot of caffeine today as well. So, yeah, I'm really excited for this. Actually, I'm just going to say I'm really excited. I'm excited to be in drag, talk to you. We're here in the 21st century. It's challenging, but we're here to meet that challenge.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're bringing all the sass and the vivaciousness of it this evening. So I guess I'll have to work out what it is that I'm bringing to the table. But so we're going to talk about a couple of things like in between relating to both of our practices.
Yeah.
And the way that we work, because like as we sort of like discussed when we were preparing for this, in some ways our work and our practices are very similar, and in some ways they're rather different. So we thought we would see what happens when we bump these ideas up against each other, and see what that can.
Dramaturgy.
Okay, you're going to derail every single conversation with that. But
I think already the difference is between our processes and how they collide are becoming apparent.
So, like the first thing that we decided that we wanted to talk about is biography, and how we use our personal biographies,
yes.
In the way that we make work.
Yeah, and it's also as well that because we paid some attention, and that the dice talks are also about the idea of personal biography in that way. And so I think that's a good point. And it's also what's quite interesting as well is that we've shared a lot of information with each other, and also on our podcast Slurry, which is on Spotify, but also as well, I think it's kind of interesting.
Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud.
And SoundCloud, yeah, but it's interesting. So I am specifically interested to ask you straight off, how do you feel personal biography fits into your work, and how do you relate to this?
This is, I was thinking about this even more today, because this is an especially loaded question, I think, when it comes to being a minority artist, right? And so like with say like a straight white neurotypical like male artist, middle class, etc. I feel like there's much more of an expectation, or much more of a willingness, or like people have much more of an expectation that he can just engage with sort of ideas, abstract ideas, without having a subject position himself. And so then when you and that's not to place personal responsibility on that artist for like everyone else's expectations of him, but then it's like the more sort of like niche or nuanced, is it more nuanced to have a different identity? The more niche your identity is, then the more people expect your biography to have an outsized influence on your work. And I think
that what's important about that as well is just because actually you face so many challenges because of this to actually get to a place that you can access your work. It's so present for you that then it's something a bit like even getting past that is a huge challenge in the first place.
And I think it can be really beneficial as well, because I think it's always an illusion that one's biography doesn't impact influence their work. It's always, because the only place that you can go to gather inspiration for material or whatever is your life. Like that because you always have a subject position and you always have a history. So it's kind of nice to sort of like embrace that. But then there is a bit of compulsion, especially in the way that funding can work, a bit of compulsion to sort of like say like this is like the the various elements of my life that have made me an outsider, and then this is how it will promote diversity or something by including me in or by funding me or whatever like this. And so I also kind of like to resist that as well by sort of like presenting myself as like as this trans other, because I think I once said when I was moderating, like hosting a party, I said, I realized that I was wearing this big white fluffy thing, and then backstage someone was like, "You look like a snowflake," and I was like, "Oh my God, tonight I'm dressed as a liberal snowflake."
Yeah.
And then I came out on stage and then told everyone, and then they laughed. And then I said, "As a non-binary trans femme," and everyone started clapping.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "But I haven't done anything yet." That's like, you're clapping my identity. That's just who I am. I'm also I work quite hard to be a good performer. But like, so it's like, it's an interesting thing about like, I tried to get sort of in between this thing of like making work that's solely about my identity and the ways in which I am marginalized as like a gender non-conforming person. And also acknowledging that all of the things about me have like made up all of my identity as a precondition for my work. So I like to use biographical information, but I often like to sort of like, it's not really, I want to avoid sort of telling the audience who like exactly what my biography is, but use it as material. So like when I do a stand-up routine about the fact that my father died when I was born, or when like, but very often it's like a very strong personal motivation, but that's not necessarily overt in the work. So I'm talking there about my theatre work that I do in contemporary dance contexts. But then also there's the thing of like improvising like while hosting on stage, and that draws a lot from like my personal experiences, but that's usually just stuff that I find funny.
Yeah, but I also as well, I think that what's so interesting as well is that when you're being really raw as a drag queen, part of the fact that you're engaging in this persona, that it's a constructed one as well. So there's this automatic displacement of identity that then you come around into this. And it's like, it's this really old cliched line that I completely love still, which is like, give someone a mask and they'll tell you the truth kind of thing. And so it's doing that. I think it's this interesting, it's like something you've advice you've given to me about performing is like, let the audience join the dots.
Yeah, totally. It's like, and I also, because I encountered this with a teacher when I did this solo dance authorship masters at the Inter-University Center for Dance in Berlin. And one of the feedbacks that I got because I like using theory in my work, because I started performing while I was doing a degree in social theory.
Yes.
Yeah,
which is something we share. We both like to use a lot of theory in our work, and there are certain challenges about using theory in the kind of work that we do. So please, that's why I'm laughing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There
are challenges, but I think sometimes it's easier to approach theory through drag than it is through academia, because very often academia, like certain ways in which it was set up and certain ways in which it continues to exist, is just to enforce a class barrier. So like a lot of the way in which theory is taught is just serves to sort of like keep certain people at the top or the bottom of the pile, So, I think it's a lot more approachable to hear like a drag queen ranting about Walter Benjamin or...
Oh my God, wait, yeah, no, wait. Dino Dada, one of our all-time favorite Berlin performers, doing the Walter Benjamin rant that was being mentioned. I think so, yeah, like...
Yeah, so like, I think it's like, it's nice to... I like to use this stuff, but then it's nice to leave it sort of open so people can, like, I make work that's inspired by my experiences of my life, like in my life.
Yeah.
I guess my experiences of my life as well. And, but then I try to make material that people can then layer their own biographies onto, like that they can relate to. They say, oh, this reminds me of that. And some of the feedback that I got was that like, I don't know, it's always kind of weird. I think a lot of trans people get this feedback at art schools, which is like, yeah, well, if you're only making work for trans people, then like most of your audience is not going to be there. And it's like, I think like, of course, I'm not interested in only making work that share an identity with me, but everyone shares the problem of having a gender, and everyone shares the problem of having an identity, right? And so if you're making work, even if like from the perspective of like a minority identity, then like I think if you make solid enough work, then people can relate to that, even if it's a different identity to theirs, you know?
Yeah, completely. I think that it's very important to to do this. I mean, I also as well, I mean, whenever you're performing, I like to layer my heckling onto what you're doing. So I do appreciate that space for you.
It always is a bit of a collaboration when you're in the audience.
Ah! Yeah, I think that's speaking collaboration, me and the girls need to just do something, which is just I love live streaming. You can just have your own bar at home. Anyway, yeah, I think that this is so
Well, then I wanted to ask you, so how is it that you use your biography
I like
in your work?
just spout shit at people about myself. No, it's very interesting. I think you mentioned lots of very interesting things about this. Something I told you about before that is my all-time worst depiction of the way that someone would use autobiography in their work. I was talking to a friend about this situation, and she described this show that I didn't see. And it was just like some super middle class art student person who made a performance art piece about the fact that he was moving house, and he'd never moved house before. And so he made an entire show about moving house from the very, and moving house is interesting. It's like, you know, these nuanced emotions and stuff. And this person was a bit like, well, I understand it's maybe not a big deal to other people, but it's a big deal to me kind of thing. But it's just like, you're moving houses, like, and you made an entire show and you got funding to do this and all of these things. I counted it recently because we were talking, there was one time, I've moved house over like 35 times, at least 35 times. And so the thing is that I said about this person that this person has just got no self-perspective, and they're just living in some ridiculous world. And I thought what would be really funny and what would have improved this show to no end is if they'd have just done it as a goldfish, because that's who they were to me. Someone, and I love the idea of a goldfish, like a show from the perspective of goldfish changing their tank. To me, is completely hysterical. And that then you could actually, if you could then use that displacement to then project your authentic emotions onto it, then you start producing this rather fantastical situation that I think that with that suspension, you create that sensational suspension, you create that space kind of thing. And I have two very big performance art pieces that I did, the Awful Journey and the Awesome Journey, which were two situations I used to create a recoordination through a practice of transvestite pilgrimage, where I took my little tranny legs and I kept walking with them like this. No, but I used these basically, and went off, did these big journeys, and I kept no records of them in the terms of diary, and I really resisted to ever say anything like, I went away and I did this, you know, and on day one I did this, day two I did that. I was completely never about that, and I've never done any. They were about creating space in that sense, but then also as well. So I find though is that what I like to do is I like to make work very distinctly from my personal perspective when I'm doing a particular sort of stage show. But I like to treat my perspective as the universal perspective, and I like to make an autistic perspective a universal perspective. And I refuse to acknowledge the notion that I am anything other than the absolute truth in this performative moment to create a suspension. Now, I don't articulate that when I'm performing on stage because I think it's arrogant. But I think that it's we don't see anywhere loud, queer, autistic narratives. You can pick two of those things. So you can have queer and autistic narratives, but they aren't loud. They're very soft and sensitive, and they get the, and then, so we just don't see this narrative anywhere. And I think that that's, you know, because I also feel very like, I quite like to be one of the reasons we're a club host is because I like to be of service in some way. I like to create this. And so often, but it's quite also as well the terms of recently my practice has been defined by doing very big shows where I walk on, I'm this very strong individualistic figure, and I feel very phallic in this moment, and I'm like here. So I like to do something that is, and so I like the idea of just projecting this thing. And it's also, as someone with an invisible disability, it's important for me to present images people haven't seen before. Because there's the idea, if you can see something you haven't seen before, then maybe you can actually have a perspective. So that's how my personal becomes the politics of my work, as it were. And so this is very important for me, but I think that ultimately that I love to use my personal material. My body, but I see my body as an implement. My body is an implement, it is a tool, and it's there to be of service. So I need to have these things, but I then like to have a certain effacement. And then I think there's something as well, is like by devoting yourself to something in a certain way, there's your relationship to it, but then there's this third space of someone watching your relationship to it. So one of the first shows that I did, I had like not hundreds, 10 meters of like this really wide material that was like tinfoil covered in like tape. And it was like very furious, and because I was thinking about labor and how they're structured. And I made it because it was a very big, spectacular texture I could make very easily. And one of the main bits of feedback I got from everyone was that they were watching it, and then they were also imagining me making all of it as well. And this really appealed to me as well, this idea, because there's this idea of the ideology of the white cube, that a white cube gallery space itself is a very ideological space. It's presented to be neutral, but it's actually a very specific thing. So I think, yeah, that's definitely the way, that's what I would use that. And that also for me means that I like that my personal relationships and my personal biography really informs the form and the setting of the piece in which I like to produce new content, kind of thing. And I know that you have a lot of strong opinions or interest in the notions of form and the form of performance. And I wondered if you want to say anything about that.
Well, I think that one of the ways, because I think there's a strong compulsion for us as sort of like as queer artists, as drag artists, a lot of drag artists who move out of drag like move into this sort of like one person show cabaret sort of thing. And it's a very...
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, but I think like it makes sense. But it's like, it's almost like once you move out of the drag bar, you then have to explain yourself. Like you have to sit down. And so I don't actually see your work as really being like a typical example of this. And I think one of the reasons that I don't see that is because...
I've always seen myself as a very conservative artist. Right now, there's a very classical representation of femininity going on.
Yeah, exactly. Very normative. But like, I think what I see in your work that I find really interesting is the form. And I think part of that comes from placing yourself as the universal subject, your relationship to geometry and excess and all of this sort of thing. So it's like, I guess in some ways it's like a confessional show, but it's a confession that no one on earth could properly understand. And this is where it becomes formally interesting for me. And I wouldn't see, like, just as an aside, like I wouldn't see your work as falling in within that thing, but it is something that's kind of expected of us, particularly in English speaking places, I think. And one of the ways that I sort of like wanted to, because I like theory. I make work that's inspired by the experiences that I've had. But I don't, and I also like performance as a way of sharing ideas. So like, I like getting up and talking about like explaining sort of like, we've both done one about the labor theory of value.
We've both done one about the labor theory of value. Well, my next question is about politics and performance.
Yeah, well, to that, but then if the thing is that gets didactic and boring if you're not paying attention to form. And so I think form is something that really saves, the whole situation. Oh my God.
Sorry.
So form
is that about the form? The context that we're working within?
It saves the work from being this sort of like didactic, like my perspective has been shut out for a really long time. And then now you're going to listen to it, which like I think is like maybe a justified perspective, but it's not a very fun one to watch.
No, but
and
we
it's
also
not so formally like I find it less artistically interesting as well. So I think it's like this attention to form and form for form's sake, or using biographical or theoretical influences to make form. Then I think that's a really valuable. And when I'm talking about form, I mean, it's like how it is that you do something. So like telling a story through an action or an interaction. I often interact with objects on stage because it's like, if you tell me to dance in a room by myself without any music, I'm just like, but if you give me music or objects, then I can do it. So like, there was a bit of fabric in my graduation piece that like, it was like Teppichunterlage, like carpet. It's the thing that stops, you lay underneath carpet to stop it sliding on a floor. Yeah, and so it like, and if you take off the protection on one side and scrunch it, it really slowly comes apart, and it looks like a scar. But it reminded me of oral forms of storytelling, because it's like you tell the story, and then like over time the story kind of changes in everyone's like in everyone's mind. And so that for me was sort of like, okay, cool. Well, my theoretical interest is in storytelling, and I think this object looks like what stories. What happens to stories over time when they're only told orally, unless it's in like a yeah. And so I think it's like otherwise I could have just stood there and said like, this is what happens to stories over time when they're transmitted orally, which is potentially not so interesting. It's like how you do it that makes it interesting on a stage, I think.
Yeah, there's this wonderful, my favorite quote about performance theory. It comes from Hannah Arendt. And Hannah Arendt is like one of the baddest bitches of like philosophy. She does not get enough credit for this. She was like the lover of Heidegger, like Nazi philosopher, but was Jewish, got caught in a concentration camp, emigrated to America, studied the trial of Eichmann, then became a philosopher, learned Greek and Latin. And then she went back and she like read all the original sources and was like, you men have got it all wrong. And she found in Ecclesiastes in the Bible, the one that looks like Eccles cake, that name. What's it?
Ecclesiastes, I think.
Ecclesiastes, Eccles cake. And so Ecclesiastes, there's something about Ecclesiastes where someone is saying like, all originality is dead and there's nothing new under the sun. And then we've heard this many times now. Everyone's like, yeah, it's all there, it's all that, it's all, it's like, and she's like, we're always getting people complaining that there's no new ideas, there's no things. And, there's this quote from someone 2,000 years ago saying that there is nothing new, everything's been done.
I feel like that's just something that people with no new ideas say. Yeah, someone said this. Someone said this at my uni. Someone like in a seminar, they were like, "Yeah, but every idea's already been had. Like everything's already been done." And I was like, "Know what I'm doing?"
Yeah. Well, what Hannah Arendt says,
like, I think my work's quite original.
I think my work's quite original, actually. Like, I think that's why. Well, that's why it's just. It's like, so I was just thinking, this necessitates the dramatical return to Tamagotchis. I just feel like doing a show entirely with Tamagotchis would like, that's definitely not been done before. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. What Hannah Arendt says is that if we've got these people complaining 2,000 years ago, there's nothing new under the sun, we've got people complaining about it now. What we can understand from this is that every origin has been set out from before, and every aim previously achieved, which is that you're at home and you're hungry, so that at some point you've gone out and you've got food, kind of thing. Like that this is all of these things have been done, and so therefore the only thing that makes anything unique in any way each time the only thing that makes anything unique is the performance of it. And it's only the way that things are done that can, and it's only performance that can provide any element of uniqueness to our lives, the way that it actually happens in this particular moment. And this is a wonderful way of basically how we can say everything is the same, but everything is also different at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I always find really inspiring. And so there is always, even though that things can, it's also as well why, like, I told you recently, I really wanted to go to a drag show. Like, this is why even when you see a really cheesy drag show where it's just done by the numbers and everything's, the really classic thing, it's still funny to me because I like drag. Like,
Yeah, because you get a bit of everything. You get some sort of like, like you get some really endearing failures. Sometimes you get like
hard vibe.
yeah, you often get a number of like endearing failures. But like I say that like it sounds a bit funny, but I also like it's really nice and relatable to see someone getting up there and just living, and you're not quite with them, but you're with them enough. And then you also see like really interesting playing with like with formal aspects. And also I think the most underrated element of a drag show is the audience. I feel like they're doing a lot of the work. There is I can't remember her name.
Yeah, but they could be trying harder.
Sorry. Yeah, I think this is what drag queens think. But like, I think the drag audiences try really hard. It's like, have you ever been in a theater? like I feel like especially in like contemporary performance and stuff, like a lot of the audience is basically there to perform a certain kind of class sophistication. Like people bring fucking notebooks to this shit, and then they're like taking notes and letting you know with their faces how you're doing. And it's like, that is actually not the audience's job, because like performance is a relationship, right? And if one side of that relationship has just decided that they are there to just to judge the other person rather than to experience what's being offered to them, then I think that they are abdicating their responsibility there. It's like, you don't have to love everything, but you like, if you're going to go to something, you should be open to it.
Yeah, I also just kind of like to do performance independent of the audience.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I know, it's sort of like that. It's also but that is because the way that I arrived in doing these sorts of specific shows comes from a background of doing durational work. So it's about the idea that you're in the setting for a very long period of time. And what's really good about that is it forces the audience to self-initiate into something. The audience person is the person who chooses the duration of how long they're in the room for, and that they're forced to do that. And that also that I find that a lot of the impassive nature of theatre audiences is to do with the fact that they feel very awkward.
Yeah.
And they feel awkward in this scenario, and they aren't sure about these things, and they actually they don't want to be too outgoing, because then they would actually be disruptive to the performance. They don't want to laugh too loud, all these things, which is suspended in a drag context as well, which is a drag context as well as like also the reality of being like the one drag queen in a theatre doing a show to a theatre audience versus being in a bar where everyone's like screaming, like a bar full of fabulous people where they're all screaming at you with a bunch of like drag queens in the back room are all screaming, and that there's this like different like two different like currents of collectivity, but then that also that people are mingling in this process as well, and there's multiple people mingling. It's like that lots of people take a turn on the stage, but then they come off the stage into the audience, so the audience also feels them like a performer, versus you have this very stark divide in a theatre between the performer and the audience.
Yeah, and I think in order to get the audience to relax, like I feel like I have this. I've had this a lot, that it's like you can also just do it with a smile, but it is an important job in a theatre to let people know that it's like, this is the kind of performance that you can like relax in. I actually said this once in a performance at school. I was like, so if you're unfamiliar with drag performance, because I had dancers and drag performance, you were in it. It was the clusterfuck. So like it was like dancers, drag performers, and I was doing live composition with them. And
the clusterfuck. Yes, I remember now. Sorry, it took me a second. Yeah, with
And at the beginning, I said to the audience, so if you're new to drag performance, just letting you know that you are allowed to laugh, and in fact you should laugh, and I promise you, if you laugh, no one's going to think that you're working class. Because I think there is this real anxiety that people have, like that, because people just like actually with like with Shakespearean theatre, people went to the theatre to be seen as well, to perform their audienceness, right?
Yeah, but it's also the thing about Shakespearean theatre is that it was content that all classes of society were present. So there were people literally standing there in like animal manure and
Yeah.
at like the bottom, and then like the higher classes. And that's why there's, in the original Shakespeare, there's loads of like very dirty jokes and stuff.
And I think that
it was
drag
designed,
do this in those theatre states, so you can come out there, or we can be having hopefully a sophisticated conversation with your your absurd breastplate. Like this play.
Wait, hey, I got 2 titties and 2 tongues. Right. Sorry, back to Shakespeare.
Yeah, but I think that's a nice thing that drag can sort of like offer in these other environments, is this sense of play and fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's very vital. It's also kind of like so something else as well is that because I feel that the voice is a physical action, the speaking is a physical action, and we treat it very much due to certain codes of our society as just an implement of will. It's just willfulness. It's just thought given form, but it's not then considered the materiality of that form. The fact that this is vibrations in the air is not something that's considered. But we also know from social media that communication without vibrations in the air, it has a wildly different effect, and it produces a wildly different culture and society actually as well, like with all these sorts of things. So that there is we need this material nature of speech to be happening for speech to be speech, which is to say speech that is not speech of the body, rather than, because otherwise what we do is we move into the realm of text, and then we have a body of text, and that's a completely different experience, even though actually that is the moment that the body does disappear. So, and we see actually dance and speech as 2 completely separate things, versus speech should be seen for what it is, which is really a dance of the vocal cords. And that within this, because this is something, within this very sophisticated analysis, it means that if I have to burp or snort or anything or spit during a performance, I keep it in, because it's about returning this very material nature. And it also means that when you're doing something that's kind of theoretical or like high up, and then you bring in these very like crass elements, it also, or these elements typically considered crass, I think that this is something that allows people to, because it's also as well, the reality is, I think that's something that drag does that's really great, is that drag allows you to do all sorts of shameful, immature, childish, and filthy things that everyone secretly wants to do all the time. You get to do that, and it gets to be this great cathartic moment. And at the same time as saying, by the simple fact that you are an adult who is there in this position, you have successfully gone through all the maturation process that you aren't actually like this as a person, because you actually have the capacity to like create this assemblage and pay your rent and do all your things, so you can come up and be this gigantic child. I think that's a really important thing that drag does.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, they're all just really big kids.
I think I think that it's important. I think it's useful for us to talk about, because like the ways in which our practices are similar. Like, because I think one of the the ways in which things that we have in common is that we both come from this outsider discipline with really terrible working conditions, which is drag. And it's also like very trendy as well.
There's trendy to be a drag queen now.
Sorry?
Very trendy to be a drag queen now.
Yeah, it's and it's like, also it's very trendy to use drag in other more established forms of performance, like so like the breasts are distracting me. You've got to stop. You've got to stop. Let them go. So it's used a lot in just let me know when you're done and I'll go on.
Okay, no, I'm done.
Yeah, thanks. So it's like you see drag used in dance and theater and stuff like this. And but yeah, then it's often done by people who didn't necessarily sort of like create these techniques or something like that. So we both operate in areas in which our practices are considered very sort of like trendy, but often aren't done by the people who like made them. So we have this unique position of actually being some of the few people who are actually drag performers doing drag in these theaters.
Yeah. It's also as well that also as well that there's this really classic one of just like the music video of like the really like hardcore like straight guy who like works in the coal mine, like, you know, leaves in the course of like 3.5 minutes of however long the song is. He's like gone to a bar, got into the mirror, and he like has this moment of like pulling out the lipstick and then doing the trembling like and there's like this small smear, and then it's like cut, and then for the final 45 seconds of the song is like on stage lip syncing to the track in like a bunch of sequins. And like this happens again and again and again and again in generation after generation after generation. And people think that it's so radical and so brave every single time, and they don't.
And it totally erases the feminized labor that goes into having a drag practice, as though you could just like walk in, find yourself, and 30 seconds later be like a professional functioning drag performer. I find these narratives so boring.
Yeah, also, I mean, it's just like it's especially the idea of a functioning drag performer is particularly unrealistic.
Yes, that's true. Like
you have stable accommodation, get out. Welcome me at that point.
I think it's like what's interesting as well is that we also what we have in common is that we're both studying sort of like a political theory. So I was doing social theory and you were doing what again?
Politics.
So we're both
international relations.
Politics and international relations. So like it's like I think we have that in common. What other things do you see that we have in common?
What other things we have in common? We're both very good orators.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the word orators means?
Yes.
Like a passive trend in I also know like a certain like trend in like I think it's more like there's something that both sort of have what is it like also as well like I think with our drag characters like you have this idea of like Olympia as being like this sort of like 5,000-year-old goddess sort of figure. I sort of like Oozing Gloop. I sometimes think about the idea of like the primordial ooze, like this sort of thing as well. I think that there's something about the fact that both of us mentally go very far back to then do something in one way, to then do something like in quite an ironic way to really to go all the way back to do something that's very much in the present moment. See? Theory into practice there.
Yeah, that's practice.
You need your body to talk properly, baby. Otherwise, you're just writing shit on social. Oh, look at that. Oh, speaking of the body is back. Yeah. And so now at this point,
you don't need to cover the breasts for me. That's fine. It's just when I'm talking, if you're tweaking your nipples, I get.
Look how sick that looks. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it does look great. Yeah, but just like save the boob action for when you're talking, I guess. Oh, but like
some wool here as well. But now I want to know about differences. I wanted
to ask you actually, because this thing that we have in common, the reaching very far back.
5,000-year-old goddess.
This has a lot to do with gender, because it's like the society in which I find myself insists that my gender does not exist. And then I'm also not really comfortable with sort of like dominant non-binary discourse, because like a lot of the framing is this sort of like progressive neoliberalism sort of thing of like everyone gets to choose exactly who we are, and like, well, which was not like, it stands in direct opposition to Butler, to, like her framing of gender performativity. So like
ideas of class formation as well.
Yeah. So like, it's like, so like while I am like non-binary, I'm it's like the only sort of, like, I sort of like have this looking, like, I know that it must be the case that people like me have always existed. And so like this, I guess this looking into sort of like some sort of like origins, like whether that's historical or infancy or whatever, to sort of like find some sort of like justification or relationship or like, yeah, I
think there is that. I think that it's like, I don't believe you thought about it that much before you started saying it.
I actually did. I was.
What did you?
I got really excited by Sumerian myth
I
because
know that, yes.
yeah, because Sumerian, like the Sumerians were one of the first people to develop a writing system, and there's this really interesting thing that as you track gods and goddesses, as you track goddesses, or like non-binary gods, the further they go along in history, the more powerless. So like we're talking about sort of like Middle Eastern and European history here. That's like the one that I know about. The further they go along, the more powerless the goddesses become. And the more gendered and the more heteronormative. So like there's this Ereshkigal is like this ancient, like the queen of the underworld. And then after like a couple of 100 years, she gets given a husband. Whereas previously she ruled sort of alone. So I'm kind of interested in this because like you see like Inanna, this goddess is like, she's like the goddess of like love and sex and war. And she just does whatever the fuck she wants. And then as you go down the ages, then you see these like Renaissance depictions of Venus as this like totally passive like love object, heterosexual love object. So like I actually was consciously interested in that.
Okay, I think that's I think that's I think it's really interesting. I think that it's like yeah, no. I have nothing more to say. I think it's really interesting.
I have a question from like from the audience. We have
noticed those too.
How do your creative processes differ when creating for IRL experience versus digital experience?
I think that, so first and foremost, my primary way of creating digital performance experiences is nailing it with photographs on social media, and that there's actually a certain technique to this. And then with digital things, I've done live streams, but probably the only thing that I can really reference is this live stream that I've done for How last year. And that was, we're making a new one. We have two streams. I have 2 streams coming up. So yeah, it's a very experimental thing right now. And previously, we were going to have a live stream live in the room so that you could see an analog experience and have a digital experience at the same time. And then what happened is a live stream performance had to just be a live stream performance. And it was this kind of complete like moment. And so, but within that, just trying to find ways, I think definitely with digital stuff, for me, it's far more important to strip back the experience. And because when you're live, you can be super like, because like there's many different perspectives, so you can't do that. Whereas with the camera, there's one specific perspective. So if you give all your energy to the one perspective of the camera, then it means that you're kind of, it's super in your face, basically, as an audience person watching that. And then it's there's a lot of nuance to do with the live experience that's lost with that. So for me, definitely it's about then making like, you know, sometimes when I'm doing live performance, I just don't like to leave any space to breathe. And then whereas doing digital performance, that is far more important. And that's the difference that I would say for me.
I think the difference for me is that like I got really into performing because I wanted to feel less lonely. I felt like when I started reading poetry when I was a teenager, I would read, I would really like it when I was like, I would be like, I recognize that. Like now looking back, it was like, it's depression, babe. Like when I'm reading Emily Dickinson, I'm like, oh yeah, that's depression, babe. But like, I would be like, someone else has felt something that I feel. And so it alleviated this sort of like queer teenager loneliness. But then as a performer, I really like to feel connected or close to the audience. Like it makes me feel less lonely, and I feel a lot less. And I really like it when I hear other people that something that I did on stage like meant something to them. So you can't really get that online. But I also kind of like it because sometimes the audience is a curse. They're just so demanding. They want everything from you, you know? And so like when I'm doing a live stream of Apocalypse Tonight with Cheryl, we just perform and chat for an hour. People tend to like it, and then like it's just done, and then it's not like having these awkward conversations with people, because I don't drink when I perform. So like very often when I get off the stage, it's like engaging with a whole bunch, like in a drag bar or something, it's engaging with a whole bunch of drunk people who like have just had this like transcendent experience based on what you've done. And I just like that part can be to like quite sort of like awkward. So I miss that relation, because performance is a relation for me, and when it's mediated, it's not the same. But it is, I'm always interested in new limitations. Yeah.
Let's see. It's also, I'm also interested in how has the last year been, the other question in the chat, which is, how's the last year been for you? Any positives, or did you suffer a lot as an artist with the lockdown of live events? And we also have just seen another one, which is, how can outsiders / non-performers support the scene when shows aren't possible? Well, with that one, like PayPaling performers directly or PayPaling tips. I thought it was, how can you break into it? But how has the last year been for you?
Well, because I have moved, so drag in bars, but has basically shut down in March and never really started up again. There were people doing stuff in between the lockdowns. There were people doing stuff over the summer, and there were some outside gigs and stuff, but it wasn't really sort of like living the way that the scene used to. There were like severe restrictions, and drag doesn't receive much public funding. So like you rely on ticket sales.
Any public funding. It is one of the most underfunded disciplines, which is a bit tragic, because drag is so publicly engaging. It's so consistently engaging with the public, and public engagement is one of the things. So I think it's also that because drag is an ongoing process, and drag performance is typically an ongoing process, lots of funding bodies like to just give money to people on a one-off sense to do a big show. In that sense. But yeah, I know actually the last year's been kind of banging for me, to be honest. Like, I'm completely into it, because as an autistic person, like having an awkward and cumbersome social engagement where you're forced to like wear an uncomfortable mask before you go out is basically what I do anyway. And now with social distance, I have like personal space. And then it's also that as a disabled person, I couldn't really function in a drag scene anymore. So I started working in a theatre setting. And that then, while this has had its own challenges, there's been certain bailouts, and I've sort of kind of like adapted my practice quite a lot in certain ways, and been sort of strategic with it, and managed to sort of just like pace things as such, so that I know that it has been really hard for a lot of people, but it's not been so hard for me. And I say that in the last year, in the summer, I broke both of my arms going over a set of bicycle handles. I had to join Alcoholics Anonymous because the corona, with the closure of clubs, I lost all the societal regulation process about my substance use. So I had to do this. And then my father died. Just after I turned 30. So there's all of these things have been happening in sequence. And so, but I actually just got some funding approved today. So I'm pretty happy right now, to be honest. Actually, like, and I know as well that Olympia, you've also managed to do very well as well.
Yeah, I like, this has been one of the like the best supported years. This has been the best supported year of being an artist for me. So like there was the 5,000 euro like that was available for a couple of days, like in May or whenever that was. That really helped a lot of people. It was like more economic stability than a lot of drag performers had when drag was functioning at its peak. So shows how precarious drag is. But I had been moving in the direction of working with theatres. Because I wanted to make stuff for longer and to work on the same thing for a longer period of time. Because the standard model in drag is that you come up with a 3 to 10 minute number, and you like, if you're doing this professionally, then you need to be coming up with at least a new one a month, and like up to one a week. And that's like, I was just really exhausted by that. I'm getting older. I think drag, like drag and drag bars, really functions off the excess energy of people in their 20s. that like because you only have the energy to put so much unpaid work into something for a certain period usually, and then you just burn out. And so
and then the old bitter queen's leeching off them. Shout out to Pansy. Yeah, take that, bitch. Okay. I think Pansy will be the first person to say she's bitter. I love her. Like, also just the amazing work that Pansy. I mean, I would
disagree, because actually, like, the work that Pansy does in terms of providing like a we've seen.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm so desperately I'm like, if I could go on Tuesday to Monsters right now, my life would be made. Like, I completely love it. So no, but there's also, but I mean, like, also as well, that it's like, it's very hard work that Pansy does, and so having lots of people with this excess energy is obviously vital to this as well.
Yeah, of course, so, because like no one in that whole process is getting paid enough. And so then you have some people who put a lot of work into like making the scaffolding to make these shows actually happen. And then you need everyone else who's willing to work, like, to also do a huge amount of unpaid work in order to get the whole thing together.
Yeah, but then also this is an aspect of.
But that was so that was why I was like wanting to sort of like not have that be my main source of income. And now, as I've worked with theaters, like I've received funding this year. I've received funding to make a show that I did in October. I got a stipend, and then I've also received funding for a big show next year. So actually, like, I think both of our experience, because we don't rely on the standard like way that drag operates, has been a lot easier than it has for a lot of other drag performers.
Yeah, but to do that, what you have to do is you have to actually take what you're doing, think about why you're doing it, take stock of that, step away, and also question what your motivations are, and then think about a way to integrate these with what's going on, rather than just the immediate, I'm doing this because it's fierce and it gets me validation on stage immediately. Which, to be honest though, because gender is such a structurating force, the chances are that if you think there's nothing interesting about your drag, you just haven't taken it long enough to have a look at it. Because there probably is something interesting. Like,
you know, I'm also, as part of the stipend that I received, I'm giving very, very discounted workshops, as in €10, for people on Zoom. I'll be doing this at a time in January, helping people to look at their practice and do what it is that you've just described, and then giving some advice on how to move into more like supported or funded arenas. So I will be publishing that stuff about that on my Facebook page and Instagram, both of which are Olympia Bukkakis. So that's like, if you're a drag performer and you are interested in moving, like trying to sort of like get some more funding or support for your practice, then you should check that out.
Yeah. And I'm just answering this question. How can outsiders / non-performers support the scene when shows aren't on? And say PayPal, oozing.gloop.goddess.
Put that in the chat rather than
gmail.com. You PayPal me and I'll keep it going for you. No, I think that, but when you see people doing, whenever people are doing Zooms or these things, when I broke both of my arms, I put a thing out asking for PayPal donations, and a bunch of them came in and it completely saved my neck. So when people are doing people rarely ask for donations on PayPal when they don't need them. So if you ever see this thing, just even like €5 or €10, because also lots of people who are performing are doing it for some kind of attention or validation. So actually, even if you aren't giving a huge amount, the fact that you have taken the time to even do this, to go in and do this thing, is something that makes people feel invested in, and that helps. And it's very important, not only financially, but actually early on in your career, you need emotional investment from people, that people are invested and they are hearing you. So you can just like the things, and if you can't afford to donate, you can also share things when people are doing them, because it's very hard to get people to engage in digital work sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that in Berlin, a lot of the like people in the English-speaking drag scene, because like there's sort of like roughly two big scenes of like the English-speaking and the German-speaking drag scenes. A lot of people in the English-speaking, and like the English-speaking one is very big. Like a lot of people in the English-speaking scenes are migrants, and not necessarily European migrants who have easy access to like to welfare. So like for example, I'm Australian, and it's like that I would technically be allowed to access welfare. But there's no guarantee that that wouldn't count against my like permanent residency application, which I'll be making next year. So it's like in terms of support, it's just really concrete, like send people money to help them survive, because like as soon as it's possible, we will be back on these stages. Like we're all doing this because we're 100% committed to it. And so like one of the best ways to make sure that that can happen again is just when people ask for money, just give it to them.
Or share that thing. And so finally, because I also I've drunk 2 martis live on screen, and obviously, you know, cause and effect. I need a wee, but there is a huge planetary conjunction happening right now, and it's a great time to think about manifestation. And we have a question about this: what would you like to manifest in your creative life, and indeed, what do you see in the future for yourself, Olympia?
Oh,
while you think about that, I can answer if you like.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to start. I want to start creative writing. I want to write short stories, and I want to do this in a fantasy and sci-fi context to create a which specifically about a commocratic world. And a commocratic world is to do with this idea that I've had of commocracy, which is a new system or practice of government or of utopia, which is communist democracy. And what this is a form of political drag, where I have a degree in politics, and it's about taking a series of ideas and putting them together to create a simple discourse that allows us to demand some kind of form of egalitarian futurity, or some sort of egalitarian future, without getting bogged down with certain like authoritarian ideas, like which is, if we use this term communism, we have these things. And also that people just don't know what democracy is. But the thing is, though, is that from doing a number of shows and a number of different things and trying lots of different art activism in various ways, if you do this very didactic, things should be like this and things should be like that, and you do this form of political critique, then it's very alienating, it's very negative, versus I really want to focus on creating positive content, which is to create stories and narratives that bring people into something and allow their imagination to roam around this. And I want to just really just look at like fantasy and like the action of imagination, which especially in these really shut down times feels like just the most beautiful and important and like timely thing I could do. And that's what I really want to manifest to focus on. And I felt for years like I could never be a writer in some way. So, but I decided I want to write, and I want to write short stories of this commocratic world, of this world run on communist democracy, that is something that we've never seen before, so that we can create a fulfillment of that. Because in fantasy, we often have like feudalist stories, which basically you have empowered female characters or empowered queer characters, but the state of women or queers in those worlds is very downbeat. And so something like that. And but I want to do this, but I want to retain my qualities as a performance artist. So I want to then, by writing short stories, to get that form of narrative, then think about how these can be translated into social media, how these can be translated to stage shows, how these narratives can then be translated into other ways of sharing, and thinking of new forms of storytelling, basically. That's really what I want to manifest in my creative life.
Nice.
Yay.
Yeah, I think what I want to manifest, or what I want to happen, like what I hope for, is that I'm really interested in new forms and new techniques. And so like, I guess because I really insist on my, so people do this thing when you step out, so when you're a drag performer who stops operating in drag bars, or who starts operating in a theater or something, that they give you this compliment where they're like, well, you know, what you do isn't really drag. Or like, you're more of an artist than a drag performer. And I always say that drag performers who aspire to be artists lack ambition, because drag is better than art because people like drag.
Whereas I like to do drag that people don't like, so I want to go for the best of both worlds. That's, to me, that's the button I want to button.
So like I still see every part, even if what I do doesn't look much like drag, I see it always as drag, because drag is how I started performing. And like, I'm not good as a performer in spite of the fact that I'm a drag performer. I am only good because I'm a drag performer. And so but I like have the reason I started wanting to move into like out of the drag bar as the only place that I operate is because I was I was getting bored of the restrictions of drag. And one of the things that really sort of like sets me free is collaborating with other kinds of, all different kinds of people. I love this. I love collaborating with dramaturgs and costume designers and set designers and like all of this. And I'm interested in, and then I'm bringing back my music practice. I'm getting a cello on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, yay!
And I'm learning to sing. And
I can't wait for you to start playing cello, because it's going to be, you're already a really good performer. And then there's like, what a stunt. Be like, and now let me bring out my cello.
And here's a fucking Bach sonata.
Yeah, and then also if you learn ballet as well, so you can like play cello, loop that, and then perform ballet to it. God.
Yeah, and so like that's where I want to go. I want to have the time and space to develop techniques, and also the resources to work with people that I find really interesting. And at the same time, I really, really want to be able to still be able to operate within like a drag environment. So like to perform in drag shows, and because I find drag so endlessly inspiring. And the reason that I do like experimental drag is because I find classical drag so exciting and so interesting that I want to pull it apart and look at its components. People often think that like alternative drag performers, like they're like rebelling against drag because it needs to be reformed or whatever. And I'm just like, I just find it so fucking interesting that I want to understand everything about a lip sync, you know? Like
Yeah. What I want is I want us to get a gigantic load of funding so that we can start a drag night together in Berlin, where we can actually pay the performers like 250 euros for each performance, and also provide like a materials budget as well.
Yeah.
And then so that there's like, and there's money from tickets and stuff like that. But then and then we have like a producer as well, so there's actually someone who's like getting everyone's tracks and all these things, so it's not so there's not one person as the comp, and that we've got a producer and we've got someone who does PR as well, and it gets it's funded so that there's a form of income from the tickets and things, but it's funded so you can actually secure that for a set amount of time. And that would just be so that we can actually do that, and then like give people, you know, a platform, and give people the knowledge that there would be a regular event where they could regularly do drag, but they could do it and really on another level, and they could really their passion for it could be reflected and rewarded. That would really be, I would love that. Wouldn't you love that? Wouldn't that be sick?
Yeah, that would like funded drag. Yeah, I think that's a really...
And then we do it together so that then one person doesn't have the responsibility of doing the whole thing.
I would love that.
Yeah, just you, me, and the girls.
Yeah, well, that brings us to a pretty natural conclusion. Thank you to those questions, the people in the... What are you doing?
I'm going to bring you to the bathroom because I'm gagging for a piss.
No, I don't want to.
It's like, that's where this is going. I'm just like, hey.
Well, thank you all very much for joining us. If you've enjoyed our conversation, check out our
podcast.
Slurry.
Wait. Let's put it in the...
Not everyone can see that chat. So it's SLU. You can type it and I'll just say it.
Slurry.
URRY. Slurry. It's available on SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We release that every week at the moment.
Yeah. We do release it every week, which is actually quite a feat considering how unreliable, or crazy the world is. So that's stunning, right?
So
yes.
Thank you very much to Dice for having us.
Thank you, Dice. This has been wonderful, and for striving on in this difficult time to provide art and culture to the people of the world in Berlin.
Yeah, it's been a lovely to chat with you, Oozing Gloop. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, see you tomorrow. Mwah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, honeys. Bye. Okay.